Peace, welcome to the channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you're not. It's shot by Curt. Today's video, I think it's long overdue. I finally need to talk about my thoughts and opinions on this Canon EOS R that I've been shooting with for the last 2 months. So if you go on to like the video, definitely drop me a like as it helps out the channel, spreads the video out to more people. Consider hitting that subscribe button and hit the bell notification so then you can be notified when I drop videos like this. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about and get out the way is the photography side of things, because I don't consider myself to be a photographer, but I do take my camera around and I take pictures here and there. When I was out in Atlanta with the homies, I took some pictures of Ryan and his son. We were out at Jackson Street Bridge. I think that those shots came out pretty cool, but again, I'm more like a candid moment type of person, but I do not consider myself a photographer at all. All that to say that I feel that the photography is pretty good on this camera. I pretty much have low expectations. It's a 30 megapixel camera, so you know, it's definitely more than enough to get the job done. So the next thing I want to talk about is, now we moving over to the video side where I actually live at, the 1080. So I came from the A7 III, and the 1080 was, in my opinion, it just wasn't usable. I mean, it's definitely usable if you make tweaks and things like that, but just straight out of the camera, I didn't really like the 1080 at all. So I always shot in 4K, and the only time that I did use 1080 was 120, which once manipulated, it pretty much, you couldn't really tell the difference of, you know, what it was shot in. But the 1080 on this camera is solid. I don't even use 4K on this camera. I mean, I have used it just because it has the crop, so I kind of use it to get closer shots, being that I only shoot on the 35mm. So when I use the 4K, it crops in and it gives me like, you know, 50mm sort of focal range. So I kind of use it for that, but outside of that, I don't even use the 4K. The 1080 is super dope. And when you upscale it to 4K, people can't even really tell the difference of 1080 4K. And then once it goes to YouTube, it gets compressed and all of that, so then you definitely can't tell. But I definitely love the 1080 and I'm a big fan of it, so I use it a lot. The next thing I want to talk about, and one of the main reasons why I knew I was going back to Canon, even though there was rumors on Sony about them doing the flip screen with the A7S III, is just for YouTube content, it's just so much easier to have the flip screen. I didn't want to wait, and two, I kind of already knew that I was going to come back to Canon anyway for various reasons. One, because I started on Canon, but then two, the flip screen is just naturally there. And the Sony I was pretty much only using for my client work. The Canon is just overall easier to use menu wise and things like that, but I'll touch on that in a minute. But yeah, man, the flip screen, I mean, that pretty much goes without saying. Without having to put a monitor and everything, do all of this building to sit down and do a YouTube video, and right now I could just pop the battery and pop the memory card and flip the screen and then get right to work. I'm good. So, you know, that's pretty much all I'm gonna say about that. So how I briefly mentioned the menu in the last one, the next one actually is the menu. The menu is way easier to use than the Sony. I know that they changed it now with like the A7S III. I know that they changed the menu, but even looking at that menu, I haven't used it, but just looking at it, I don't really care for it. This one is just pretty much way more user friendly. Like if you've never touched a camera or anything, it's pretty much like your smartphone. Touch screen, pretty much. They have like the logos up at the top where you can see exactly what you need to go to in terms of like Wi-Fi, video, photo. Everything is just pretty much laid right out. You touch a tab, it opens up the plethora of menus right up under it, and so on and so forth. And then it has like the sub menus, 1 through however many pages is there at that moment, or under the setting that you're under. And it's just so much easier than the previous Sony menu. And I can't really speak on any other cameras. I watch a lot of videos on them, but personally, having my hands on other cameras, I can only speak on Sony and Canon. And if I had to compare it to Sony's old menu, this is just so much easier. And looking at the new Sony menu, I'm probably still going to say that this is a lot easier and a lot more user friendly and intuitive. Let's talk about a couple of the things that I do not like or not a big fan of with this EOS R. So the first thing is 60 frames per second. Now before I went to Sony, 60 frames per second was pretty much the only thing that I had, and it wasn't a problem or anything, but it's like once you get your hands on 120 frames per second, it just kind of like changes things. So this camera actually has 120 frames per second, but it's in 720p. Not the worst thing in the world. People have done videos on them. I think YC actually did a dedicated video to this very thing. I just never got around to it. I think there's like no autofocus and, you know, things like that. All things that you can bypass and, you know, deal with. But I can't get with it. I don't know why. I just can't get with it. But when I was using the 6400 and the A7 III, I got so used to that 120. It's hard to, I mean, I've gotten used to using 60 again, and I know how to manipulate it to where I can get it as slow as I want, or, you know, things like that. But that, I mean, I think they could have definitely did 1080 120 and it would have worked out a lot better, but they didn't. They saved it for the R6 and the R5. So another thing that I want to touch on is the 4K crop. Now earlier I said, since I have only this 35mm, I use it to kind of get like a 50mm look, because it has the crop. I think it's like a 1.7 1.8 times crop, and I use it to just, you know, punch in a little bit closer. But I really wish that it didn't have this 4K crop at all, coming from the A7 III, and I hate to keep, you know, doing that, but coming from the A7 III, I pretty much have full frame 4K, 24 frames per second. I didn't use 30, so 24 frames per second. I had the full sensor readout 4K, and I loved it. So then when I came to using the EOS R and then having this crop, I mean, it's not nothing that can't be worked around. You can use wider lenses. It's a wide variety of things that you can do to get around the crop, to get the look that you're trying to get. It's just I got so used to using the 4K full frame and having the full width of the sensor used, and you know, it would have been dope to have that on here, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers. Now the last thing that I'm gonna talk about is IBIS. Now, for the sake of how I've been running this video pretty much the whole time, the A7 III and this, the IBIS on the A7 III is almost non-existent. Like it's there, I guess, but like to me it's almost like non-existent. It's almost like when I shoot handheld, it kind of looks like there's no IBIS on it. But on this one, it doesn't have IBIS. It has like movie image stabilization, and I don't use it, not a fan of it. It could probably be useful, but it adds more of a crop, if I'm not mistaken. I already got enough crop going on as is with the 4K. So I don't use the movie stabilization. It definitely would have been great if this had in-body image stabilization, but again, it seems like that's one of those things that they save for the R6 and the R5. So that's pretty much gonna do it for today's video. That is my thoughts and opinions on the EOS R after using it for 2 months. I love the camera though, like all the shortcomings and things aside, like, or even with the shortcomings, like I love the camera. I do not regret switching from the A7 III. Although I'm thinking about buying another A7 III specifically for my client work, but I'm probably not going to do that. I'm just going to wait and get the R5, even though I know people are bashing it. I'm going to get the R5 still, and then I'm still going to keep my EOS R. So I will be sticking with Canon in that regard. If y'all like the video, definitely drop it a like. Consider hitting that subscribe button. Hit the bell notification. Make sure you get notified when I drop the next video. And I'll catch y'all in the next video, man. Y'all stay creative.